The room had already changed. Not the lights, not the machines, not the white walls or the smell of antiseptic that clung to every breath inside that pediatric emergency unit. What changed was the feeling. That invisible shift that happens when trained people stop fighting and start grieving. Nurses who had been moving seconds ago went still. A doctor lowered his hands. Another looked toward the clock, then toward the child on the bed, as if time itself had become something cruel to look at. In the corner, a man in a navy suit held the side of the wall so hard his knuckles had gone pale. He was rich enough to buy buildings, fund campaigns, and make one phone call that could move markets before lunch. But none of that mattered now. His baby boy was not breathing. Then the door opened, and a boy nobody had invited stepped inside. He looked like the kind of child most people learn not to see. Thin frame, scuffed sneakers, faded burgundy hoodie under a denim jacket that had clearly belonged to someone bigger first. His hair was uneven, like it had been cut with care, but not by professionals. His face was young, but his eyes were not. They held the kind of caution only life can teach. He should not have been there. Everyone in that room knew it. But before anyone could stop him, the boy glanced once at the baby, once at the monitor, and said 5 words that froze the room harder than silence ever could. "You're trying the wrong thing." For 1 second, nobody moved. Then the senior doctor turned sharply, anger rising fast. Because people do not like being corrected at the edge of failure, especially not by a homeless black teenager who looked like he had walked in from a bus station. The man in the suit lifted his head, eyes red, face breaking under pressure no father should ever know. A nurse stepped forward to escort the boy out, but the boy didn't back away. He stared at the baby instead, like the rest of the room had disappeared. "Give me 30 seconds, he said quietly. "If I'm wrong, throw me out." Years later, some people would remember that moment as a miracle. Others would call it impossible. A few would say it was luck, but luck had nothing to do with it. Because what happened in that room did not begin in that hospital. It began months earlier under a leaking overpass, in a church basement, beside a public library recycling bin, and in the heart of a boy the world had underestimated for far too long. His name was Zaire Brooks, and he was 14 years old. If you saw him that morning near the bus stop on Auburn Avenue, you probably wouldn't have looked twice. He sat on a low concrete edge with a paper cup of oatmeal cooling in his hands, watching the city pull itself awake. Delivery trucks groaned through intersections. A woman in scrubs hurried past with her badge swinging from her neck. A man in a tie barked into his phone before the sun had fully settled over the buildings. Atlanta moved fast, and it had taught Zaire to move around it like smoke. Visible enough not to be hassled, invisible enough not to be bothered. He had been without a real home for 11 months, not always on the street. Sometimes he stayed at New Mercy Church when they had room. Sometimes a shelter downtown gave him a bunk for 2 nights, sometimes 3 if the weather turned bad. Once in a while, an older woman named Miss Loretta let him sleep on her enclosed porch when she knew the temperatures were going to drop. But nothing lasted. Everything temporary. Everything borrowed. Even safety. His mother had died the previous spring after a fast, brutal illness that emptied the apartment, the savings, and then the air from the life he knew. His father had been gone years before that, the kind of gone that doesn't deserve explanation. Zaire had one younger sister, Nia, but after their mother passed, Child Services split them into separate emergency placements. Nia went to a foster family in Macon. Zaire ran before they could place him for good. Maybe that sounds reckless. Maybe it was. But 14-year-old boys carrying grief don't always choose what's wise. they choose what feels survivable. What kept him going wasn't just stubbornness, it was purpose. Long before the hospital, before the shelters and soup lines, and the endless exhaustion of pretending he was tougher than he felt, Zaire had become obsessed with one thing: how the body works when it is almost lost. The obsession started when Nia nearly died in front of him at age 6. She had choked on a piece of hard candy during a neighborhood cookout while adults were shouting, music was playing, and nobody noticed what was wrong fast enough. By the time someone did, her lips had started turning gray. A woman visiting from another block had rushed in, turned Nia over, delivered quick back blows, and saved her in less than 15 seconds. 15 seconds. That was all it took for the world to split in Zaire's mind into two kinds of people: those who panic and those who know what to do. From then on, he paid attention. He read discarded health pamphlets. He picked up old biology workbooks from donation bins. He listened outside first aid workshops when he wasn't allowed inside. Later, when his mother grew sick and neighbors came by less often, he became the one reading prescription labels aloud, checking times, learning words too big for middle school. Inflammation, arrhythmia, oxygen saturation, aspiration. After she died, that curiosity could have died with her. Instead, it became the one thing nobody could take from him. There was a retired black paramedic named Curtis Hale who volunteered every other Saturday at New Mercy Church. He ran a free safety class in the fellowship hall, mostly for single mothers, elderly tenants, and anyone who wanted to learn CPR. Most weeks, people came for 15 minutes and left with coffee. Zaire stayed through every class he could. He stood near the back at first, quiet, arms folded, pretending not to care. Curtis noticed him anyway. "What's your name, young blood?" he asked one morning. "Zaire." "You here for the donuts or the knowledge?" "Knowledge." Curtis had laughed, but not in a mocking way. "Good answer. Means I can teach you the real stuff." And he did. He taught Zaire how to recognize airway blockage by sound before panic makes everyone deaf. He taught him the difference between chest compressions and clearing an obstruction. He taught him that babies are not small adults, and what helps one can harm the other. He taught him that in emergencies, people often keep doing the wrong thing because stopping feels more terrifying than adjusting. Most important, he taught him to observe before acting. "Folks look," Curtis said once, tapping his temple, "but they do not see. If you can see under pressure, you already ahead of half the room." Zaire never forgot that. The morning everything changed, he had not planned on going near Grady Memorial at all. He was supposed to meet Miss Loretta near the food pantry by 10. She sometimes saved him day-old cornbread and fruit cups before the volunteers tossed them. But at 9:14 a.m., he saw a black SUV screech to a stop so violently that one tire clipped the curb. A man jumped out from the back seat, holding a baby wrapped in a pale blanket. He wasn't moving like rich men on television moved. He was moving like fathers in nightmares move. Too fast, too terrified, too late. Zaire stood. He didn't know why at first, just felt it. Something in the way the man shouted for help. Something in the limp angle of the baby's arm. Something in his own chest that tightened with an old memory. The father ran through the emergency entrance, screaming, "He's not breathing! He's not breathing!" Zaire followed. He slipped inside behind a woman pushing a stroller and stayed against the wall. Two nurses rushed the baby onto a pediatric cart. A doctor asked questions in a clipped voice. How long unresponsive? Any known allergies? Choking? Water? Fever? The father was trying to answer, but fear had scrambled his thoughts. His nanny called me. He was in the nursery. I don't know. There was milk. I think he spit up. I found him blue. Please, please just save my son. The name Adrian Cole meant nothing to Zaire at first, but it meant everything to everyone else. He caught it in whispers. That's Adrian Cole. The Cole Capital guy? The billionaire? Get Pediatrics now. Adrian Cole was one of the youngest black billionaires in the state, founder of a logistics and infrastructure company that seemed to own pieces of every highway project, shipping route, and commercial expansion from Atlanta to Charlotte. His face appeared in magazines beside headlines about generational wealth, leadership, and legacy. But inside that emergency unit, he was only a father with shaking hands and a breaking voice. The baby's name was Miles. He was 9 months old. The team moved quickly. Oxygen, suction, monitoring, positioning. The first doctor suspected severe aspiration. Another called for pediatric respiratory support. A nurse tried to clear visible fluid. Someone mentioned the possibility of sudden infant respiratory collapse. Another started counting time out loud. Zaire stayed at the doorway, silent. He watched the doctors work. He watched the father collapse into the corner. He watched the monitor numbers rise, dip, then flatten into something too steady to be good. And because Curtis had trained him to see under pressure, he noticed two things almost everyone else missed. First, the baby's chest wasn't reacting the way a fully obstructed airway usually reacts under the method they were using. There was resistance, but not in the pattern the room seemed convinced of. Second, there was a faint, wet clicking at the back of the throat every few seconds, subtle enough to disappear under the noise and fear. Zaire stepped closer. The senior physician glared at him. "Son, you cannot be in here." Then Zaire saw the baby's fingers twitch. Small, fast, barely there. Not random, not nothing. That was when he spoke. "You're trying the wrong thing." The room turned. The doctor's face darkened. Security. But security was not in the room. And Adrian Cole, whose whole life had trained him to judge conviction inside people, lifted his eyes toward the boy. Zaire didn't look scared. He looked certain. "What did you say?" Adrian asked, voice cracking. Zaire pointed, not at the machine, but at Miles's throat and shoulder line. "He's not gone. He's blocked low and tilted wrong. If you keep forcing air like that, you're missing the pocket." Maybe a trained specialist would explain it differently, maybe with cleaner language. But certainty has a force of its own, especially when it arrives before hope dies completely. The doctor took a step toward him. "You need to leave now." Zaire didn't move. "Give me 30 seconds. You are a child. And he's still fighting." Nobody expected Adrian Cole to be the one who answered next. "Let him talk." The doctor stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Cole, let him talk." There are moments when status disappears, and moments when it enters a room like a commandment. This was both. The doctor hesitated. A nurse looked from Adrian to the boy and back again. Zaire moved carefully to the bedside, not touching the baby at first. He leaned close, watching, listening. Then he said, "Angle him down slightly. Clear again, but lower. There's fluid sitting wrong." The nurse hesitated only half a second before adjusting position. The baby's head turned more precisely. Zaire guided with his hands in the air, not grabbing, not disrupting, just seeing what others weren't seeing. Again, he said. More suction. Nothing. Once more. Lower. A thin obstruction shifted. Then it happened fast. Miles coughed. Once. Weak, ragged, but real. A nurse gasped. Another doctor lunged in. More fluid cleared. The cough came again, stronger this time, followed by the sharp, painful cry of a baby returning to the world with all the anger life demands from the nearly lost. The monitor changed. Not perfect, not safe yet, but alive. Alive. Adrian Cole slid down the wall like his bones had stopped working. He covered his mouth with both hands and sobbed without dignity, without restraint, without caring who saw. The room exploded into motion again. Orders were shouted. Oxygen was resecured. The respiratory team rushed in. A nurse who had been seconds away from giving up started crying openly while working. Zaire stepped back. No smile. No triumph. Just a breath leaving his chest like he had been holding it for years. He turned to go. Maybe he would have made it out too. Maybe the whole world would have called him a rumor if Adrian hadn't looked up at exactly that moment and seen the boy reaching for the door. "Wait," Adrian said. Zaire paused. The man crossed the room in 3 uneven steps, stopped in front of him, and looked at him the way powerful men almost never look at people with nothing. Fully, directly, without performance. "What is your name?" "Zaire." "How did you know that would work?" Zaire shrugged once, not out of arrogance, but survival. "I've been learning." "From where?" "Wherever I can." Adrian looked down at the shoes, the jacket, the backpack, the tiredness. He understood more in that one glance than most people do after whole conversations. "Where are your parents?" Zaire said nothing. That was answer enough. The next few hours became a storm. Hospital administrators appeared. Specialists questioned everyone. One nurse insisted the boy had noticed what others missed. The senior physician, to his credit, admitted later that tunnel vision had taken over the room. By afternoon, Miles Cole was stable in pediatric intensive care, exhausted, but expected to recover. By evening, word had begun to leak. The billionaire's baby had survived. A homeless teenage boy had helped save him. By night, reporters were already calling the hospital. But the thing nobody saw that first night was Zaire, sitting alone on a church basement cot, staring at the ceiling and wondering whether he had just changed his life or made it more dangerous. Because rescue stories sound beautiful after the fact. Inside them, they are messy. At first, Zaire didn't trust Adrian Cole at all. He had met enough adults to know that gratitude and permanence were not the same thing. Rich people especially loved emotional promises when cameras were nearby. But the next morning, Adrian came alone to New Mercy Church. No reporters, no assistant, no black SUV parade. Just him, a plain charcoal sweater, and a face that looked like it had not slept. Curtis Hale happened to be there. When Adrian learned Curtis had been teaching Zaire for months, he turned to the old paramedic with eyes full of something like shame. "You mean to tell me this boy had talent like that, and the city left him outside?" Curtis answered in the flat tone of a man too experienced to be impressed by wealth. City leaves a lot of people outside. Adrian took that hit without defending himself. Then he asked Zaire a question no one had asked in a long time. What do you want? Not what do you need? Not what happened to you? Not why are you in this position? Just, what do you want? Zaire looked down at the floor. I want to learn enough that next time I don't have to guess. Adrian nodded slowly. That was the beginning. It wasn't charity, at least not the kind that makes one person feel noble and the other feel small. Adrian understood something about investment. He had built an empire identifying overlooked value before others could price it. Zaire wasn't a stock or a startup, and Adrian knew better than to reduce him to one. But he also recognized rare instinct when he saw it. Within 2 weeks, Zaire had a caseworker who actually returned calls. He was placed, not dumped, with a respected foster mother named Dr. Althea Morgan, a widowed black pediatric dentist in Decatur who had spent years caring for children nobody else wanted long-term. Her house was loud in the best way. 2 foster boys argued over cereal brands every morning. A teenage girl practiced violin badly but passionately in the afternoons. The kitchen always smelled like onions, garlic, and something baking. The first night there, Zaire slept on top of the blanket with his shoes still on. Dr. Morgan noticed, but didn't say a word. The second night, she put a folded pair of sweatpants on the chair beside his bed and told him breakfast was at 7, whether he trusted anybody or not. The third night, she knocked once and asked if he preferred the lamp on or off. The fourth night, she left the door cracked because some children sleep better hearing life happening down the hall. By the second week, Zaire finally took his shoes off before lying down. Healing does not happen all at once. Sometimes it begins with shoes. Adrian kept his distance at first, but not his promise. He made sure Zaire was enrolled in school with strong science support. He paid for tutoring without announcing it like a favor. He funded New Mercy Church's emergency youth program in a way that did not put his name on every wall. He hired a legal team to help reconnect Zaire with his sister Nia, whose foster placement had fortunately turned stable and loving. For the first time in nearly a year, Zaire heard her voice regularly. "You sound different," Nia told him on their second supervised call. "How?" "Less tired." He didn't know what to say to that. Meanwhile, baby Miles healed. He was fragile for a while, watched carefully, held too close by parents who now understood how fast life can turn. Adrian's wife, Simone Cole, met Zaire a month later. She had spent years beside power and had learned to spot fake goodness from a mile away. She studied him over dinner one evening, with a kind expression he did not yet know how to trust. "You saved my son," she said finally. Zaire looked uncomfortable. "The doctors saved him. You helped them save him." That felt harder to dismiss. Life moved. School was brutal at first. Not the classes, the people. Children can smell difference before adults even name it. Zaire had the wrong clothes, the wrong silence, the wrong history. A few boys mocked his old backpack. One asked if he had ever slept in a dumpster. Another called him charity case under his breath in the locker room. Zaire nearly got suspended the day he slammed one of them into a row of metal lockers for laughing about his sister. Dr. Morgan made him apologize. Then she drove him for milkshakes and said, "You were wrong for hitting him." "I know. But you are not wrong for hurting." That sentence stayed with him. Curtis stayed in his life too. Every other Saturday became non-negotiable. Compression technique, airway response, bleeding control, shock recognition, scene safety. Zaire learned it all with a hunger that made adults quiet when they saw it. He wasn't trying to impress anybody. He was trying to become impossible to overlook ever again. By 15, he was the best science student in his grade. By 16, he had completed certified youth emergency response training through a city partnership Adrian quietly helped expand. By then, the story of the hospital rescue had faded from headlines, but not from the people who mattered. Nurses still remembered the boy in the burgundy hoodie. One of them mailed him an anatomy flashcard set for his birthday with a note that read, "Keep seeing what others miss." The senior physician who had wanted him removed sent a letter too, short, formal, sincere. He apologized for dismissing him before understanding him. Not all adults have the courage to do that. Zaire respected him for it. Adrian Cole did something bigger the following year. He created the Miles Initiative, a scholarship and emergency skills program for homeless and housing-insecure youth across Georgia. The idea was simple and radical. Stop assuming survival intelligence has no academic value. Fund the children who have been learning under pressure all along. The first class included 14 students. By year 3, there were more than 100. At the launch event, cameras flashed, donors applauded, and politicians smiled too hard. Zaire hated every second of the spotlight. He stood behind the podium anyway because Curtis said courage isn't always running toward emergencies. Sometimes it's standing still while truth looks through you. When Zaire spoke, he didn't tell the crowd about heroism. He told them about the library recycling bin where he found his first emergency medicine workbook. He told them about church ladies who packed extra fruit in napkins for kids who pretended they weren't hungry. He told them about how many brilliant children never get called gifted because nobody bothers to look past the dirt on their sleeves. The room went silent in the right way. Not the silence of giving up, the silence of finally understanding. After the speech, a boy about 12 approached him near the side curtain. He looked nervous and angry in the way kids do when they've been disappointed too many times already. "You really used to sleep outside?" the boy asked. "Yeah." "And now you in honors classes and all that?" "Yeah." The boy looked at him for a long second. "So then, maybe I ain't done either." That sentence hit Zaire harder than any applause ever could. Miles Cole turned 4, then 5. He grew into a bright, stubborn little boy who loved toy trucks, hated green beans, and ran toward Zaire every time he visited the Cole house, as if no time had passed. Children have no interest in social categories adults worship. To Miles, Zaire was simply the person who stayed. One evening, during a family cookout in the Coles' backyard, Adrian watched his son laugh in Zaire's arms beneath strings of soft garden lights and whispered something to Simone that she later repeated to Dr. Morgan. "We spent years building a legacy," he said, "and the most important thing that ever happened to our family walked into a hospital wearing somebody else's jacket." It might have been enough for the story to end there. But life, when it is honest, keeps going. At 17, Zaire finally met his sister Nia in person again after nearly 2 years apart. The reunion happened in a supervised family transition center with beige walls and a box of broken crayons on the table. He was terrified she wouldn't recognize him. She ran into him so hard she nearly knocked him off the chair. "You got taller," she accused. "So did you." "You still cry at sad movies?" "No." "You lyin'." He laughed then, really laughed, the kind that comes from relief so deep it almost hurts. The state began exploring kinship options for future contact, and Dr. Morgan, who had more quiet influence than most people realized, made sure the process did not stall into bureaucracy. By senior year, colleges wanted Zaire. Not because of the rescue story, because he had earned the numbers, the essays, the recommendations, the discipline. One admissions director described his application as written by someone much older than 18. That wasn't a compliment exactly. It was a record of what hardship had cost him. He chose Howard. Curtis cried when he opened the acceptance letter. Dr. Morgan cried too, but later in private, while pretending onions were the reason. Adrian and Simone hosted a dinner for him before he left. Nothing extravagant, though even their simple looked expensive. At dessert, Adrian stood, raised a glass, and told everyone in the room something he had never said publicly before. The day my son almost died, I believed money had finally met a wall it could not move. And I was right. Money did not save Miles. Skill did. Character did. Attention did. A boy this country would have ignored if he had arrived 1 minute later did. So tonight is not about gratitude alone. It is about correction. Because when a society mislabels children like Zaire as broken instead of unfinished, that society robs itself. Nobody clapped immediately. The words landed too heavily for that. Then Curtis stood first. Then Dr. Morgan. Then everybody else. Howard challenged Zaire in every way he wanted. Anatomy labs, long nights, competitive classmates who had grown up with stability and prep programs and polished confidence. For a while he felt behind. Then something happened that often happens to people forged in difficult places. Under pressure, he became sharper. He had known pressure before textbooks gave it cleaner names. He volunteered with mobile health units. He tutored first-year students in practical emergency response. He spent holidays back in Atlanta helping the Miles Initiative run winter safety workshops. On one bitter January night, after teaching a class on infant airway emergencies to teenage shelter residents, he stayed behind to clean folding chairs. A girl packing up handouts looked at him and asked, "Why you still come back here? You could be anywhere." He smiled without looking up. "Because somebody came back for me." Years passed. Not all of them easy. Curtis suffered a mild stroke but recovered enough to keep teaching, though slower now. Dr. Morgan retired from dentistry and started pretending she enjoyed resting, which fooled nobody. Adrian weathered business scandals, expansion battles, and the ugly public attention success attracts. Simone launched a maternal wellness fund after realizing how many women, especially Black women, felt invisible in pediatric emergency systems until it was nearly too late. The rescue in that hospital room had saved more than one child. It had rearranged multiple lives. At 26, Dr. Zaire Brooks stood in a pediatric emergency department for the first time as a resident physician. Not a visitor. Not an intruder. Not the boy at the door. A doctor. His white coat felt strange on the first day. Not because it was new, but because memory is heavy fabric. He ran his fingers once over the folded badge, then entered the unit with his stethoscope tucked into place and Curtis's oldest lesson still echoing in his mind. Folks look, but they do not see. That night, just after midnight, a panicked mother rushed in carrying a little girl who could barely breathe through an acute allergic reaction. Staff moved quickly. Orders flew. The room tightened. A younger resident reached for one approach too early, and for one split second, Zaire saw the same thing he had seen years before. Capable people inches away from narrowing too soon under pressure. He stepped in calmly. "Wait, Look at her airway again. The team adjusted, reassessed, corrected. The child stabilized. No miracle, just skill, just seeing. Afterward, as the monitors settled into safer rhythms, Zaire stood for a moment near the sink and let the memory wash through him. The frightened boy he had been, the baby on the bed, the father against the wall, the door opening on a life nobody expected. He thought about his mother, about Nia, about church basements, donation bins, bus stops, library cards, second chances, and the dangerous lie that talent only comes dressed one way. Then his phone buzzed. A photo message. It was from Adrian. Miles, now a lanky teenager with a crooked grin, stood in a school gym holding a science fair ribbon. Beneath the picture, Adrian had typed just 6 words. "He wants to be like you." Zaire looked at the screen for a long time before sliding the phone back into his coat pocket. Then he returned to work. Because love is beautiful, but purpose still needs hands. If you ask people in Atlanta now about Dr. Zaire Brooks, they'll tell you different versions. Some will say he's a brilliant pediatric emergency physician. Some will say he's the former homeless teen who saved a billionaire's baby. Some will mention the scholarship program, the youth trainings, the interviews, the recognition, the speeches. But those who know the full story tell it another way. They say one unseen boy carried knowledge the world never thought to ask him about. They say one father had the humility to listen when pride could have cost him everything. They say one retired paramedic kept showing up for kids who were easy to ignore. They say one foster mother understood that trust is built in ordinary moments, long before it can survive extraordinary ones. They say one church basement, one library bin, one extra meal, one open door, one carefully taught lesson can travel farther than anyone knows. And they are all right. Because the truth is, Miles Cole did not survive because of a miracle from nowhere. He survived because kindness had been moving quietly through strangers for years, gathering in places nobody wealthy, polished, or powerful thought to look. By the time Zaire walked into that hospital room, he wasn't alone at all. He was carrying every small act that had kept him alive long enough to save. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from.